Data free on your phone on the MTN network in South Africa. T+C supply.
Elevate your performance with the goodness of whole grains. AGT Foods quinoa and bulgur wheat deliver sustained energy for every workout. Stay fit, stay healthy. Brought to you by AGT Foods Africa. Good food, good health, good life. Tell you a man who's lived a good life. This guy, NSA Global Security Consultants, is something he founded a couple of years ago. But he also used to look after some Nelson guy. And when I say Nelson, I mean that Nelson. And I think we all know that you got to look after Xhosa people, especially when they are that level of greatness. It is an absolute pleasure to have Rory Steyn with us this morning. Rory, I want to get straight into it. Of course, security is your business, and you know it like nobody else. You don't just get to stand next to the great Nelson Mandela unless you're that guy. You're one of the most respected security advisors in the world, having done Olympics, World Cups, major events. Tell us about your role in making security the number one priority at sports events.
Well, first of all, good morning and thank you for having me on the Ultimate African Sport audio channel today on Omnisport. It's a privilege to be speaking to you guys. Well, I'll tell you what, it started in the day after I actually left President Mandela's service. You know, those 5 years were easily the greatest 5 years of my life, the privilege of serving, you know, such a human being, in my view, the greatest one of the last century. But he finished office on the 16th of June, and on the 17th of June, Dr. Ali Bacher sent me to England to go and have a look at how they were hosting the 99 Cricket World Cup, because the ICC had whispered to us that we would host the 2003 one. And as it turned out, we did. So he said, I need a security consultant at Cricket South Africa or the United Cricket Board of South Africa, as it was at the time. I'd never had a security consultant. So he packed me off to London. I visited 3 of the venues hosting World Cups, came back, visited all of our venues, wrote a report saying this is what we need to do, this is the gap. We need to get here to host the world event, and I've been doing it ever since. I'm proud to say that 25 years later, Cricket South Africa is still a client of ours, and as you said, that's taken me to Rugby World Cups, FIFA World Cups, 6 Olympic Games, and it's been a wonderful privilege because, you know, when I left the police, I said to a bunch of people who are considered mentors, I said, guys, all I know is policing, but my passion is sport. You know, do I give up security and try and find a career in sports marketing? That discipline was in its embryonic stages, and to a man they said to me, no, stick with what you know. And as it turned out, I got to do both. It's almost like having your cake and eat it. Yeah.
You love to hear that, and I mean you've created that. It's an absolutely unbelievable thing, and it's continued not just for you locally, but you've gone really global as you are down in Stellenbosch right now. With the Glasgow Warriors. What is your role with the side there?
So each of the overseas teams that come to South Africa in the URC as well as in the Investec Cup and the EPCR, they will hire a security consultant, you know, just to make sure that they don't do anything stupid by getting themselves into the wrong areas or whatever. And because of the privilege that we have of Kyle's involvement at Warriors, they came to us. So I never charge them. I donate my time to Glasgow Warriors because it's, you know, they look after our boys so well. But yeah, that's what I'm doing down here. We have one other guy who's actually doing the work. I just kind of float around and oversee things now at this stage of my career. But that's what we're doing down here. We're taking care of them. And, you know, they have this incredible facility down here called the Stellenbosch Academy of Sport. The Blitzboks are in here. Our ladies team is in the Springbok women, and there's a bunch of the Springboks also knocking around. And it's just a fantastic environment in which to prepare for a match. And as it turns out, I'm not sure whether there's a stadium clash or something on Saturday, but when the Stormers host Glasgow Warriors this coming Saturday, it won't be at the DHL. They're actually playing at the Donny Craven Stadium right here in Stellenbosch, you know, home ground of Marty's. So yeah, we've got everything. Everything's walkable. You know, we walk around the corner to training at Paulus High. It's just a wonderful environment to prepare. As I said, yeah, privileged.
Love to hear it.
Sorry,
go ahead, Kim.
MK.
Go ahead,
so
go ahead, Kim.
Rory, is Carl out with the team, or has he stayed behind to look after his child? He's just become a father.
How's it to you? Very sadly, he returned to Glasgow yesterday. So if you follow the URC, I think it was their second game, he was hit high in the air, jumping for a high ball.
Yeah, I remember.
Very clumsy tackle for which the player was yellow carded, but there was impact on his lower leg, and initially thought it was just a minor tear in the tendon down between the fibula and tibia. However, once they'd rehabbed that and he started to train, so he was picked as captain and on the left wing against the Sharks, but as he kind of put load on that in the training week, they discovered a blooming fracture, a hairline fracture in the fibula that now requires surgery. So he didn't play against the Sharks, and he was packed off on Sunday and landed in Glasgow yesterday. He has surgery tomorrow. So, yeah, these things happen, I guess, in professional sport. It's always a hang of a disappointment for all of us to deal with, but I think that's what you sign up to as a professional sportsman. You've got to take the ups and the downs.
You really do. It must be incredible for you to see your son reaching his potential. You should be incredibly proud. I think as parents, you know, I'm not a parent, but our parents just want us to reach our potential. To watch your son become a professional sportsman, that must be quite something to witness.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute privilege and eye-opener. You know, that kid, he came from a school that has very little to no rugby legacy, a small private school in Joburg, and he single-mindedly decided. You know, he said to my wife and I, he got a good matric. He said to my wife and I want to go to Stellenbosch. So we said, well, what do you want to study? He said, I don't know. I want to go there and play rugby. So and that's how single-minded he's been. He went from Stellenbosch to Griquas to Glasgow and now, you know, to Scotland. And he's just been single-minded in the determination to be successful at what he has chosen to do. And of course, we're proud of that, you know, as our own personal family as well as the extended family. But at the end of the day, guys, I think we're prouder of Kyle as to the person that he is outside of rugby. And that's what I said to him in the text message. He was on a plane and I sent him a WhatsApp after I thought about it. And I said, you know, your family loves you quite apart from what you achieve on a rugby field. And that's what we are the most proud of. You know, he's turned into quite a. He's now a dad, and he's turned into quite a decent human being. I must credit my wife for that.
Yeah, smart there. Head of and founder of NSA Global Security Consultants, Mr. Rory Steyn, of course, famously looked after the great Nelson Mandela, but is one of the most respected security advisors in the world. Joining us now, Rory. I want to take it to the round ball. There were some issues with crowd invasions in Durban when Bafana played Congo a couple of weeks ago. Before we get into it, what should have happened? Tell us how they could have observed the protocols better, and how much staff should be on duty, etc. What are the safety parameters you kind of have to build in to avoid what we saw there?
Yeah, those are great questions, and let me preface my answer by saying that one of the things I try and avoid as much as possible is speculating, because you can be made to look really foolish if you speculate. And because I wasn't there, and all I'm doing is kind of judging this as an armchair critic after the fact, that's the best that I can do. So let me just say that. So your question is, how many security should there be? And you know, it's such a difficult thing to answer, and there are a whole host of parameters and criteria that influence that decision. The problem, so let me just stop there and not just blithely move on. So things like, who are the teams playing? Where are they playing? What, you know, is there a history between them? Are the supporters generally, you know, well behaved? Well, that's hard to say with soccer, but you know, you look at a whole. You know, has the stadium successfully managed and hosted international matches before? Is their stadium vendor good at what they do? Do they use registered security personnel? So all of those things form kind of, let's say, a risk assessment. And then based on the outcome of that risk assessment, you deploy your resources to mitigate whatever risks are identified. The problem that I see in football, and I base this on, you guys may recall, there was a wonderful, it only lasted 5 years, but there was a wonderful competition back in the day called the Vodacom Challenge, where you had Chiefs and Pirates as our top two local teams playing against an international team. And I mean, we had Man United out here, we had, I think Barcelona came, we had Tottenham Hotspur, a bunch of the top international clubs came, and they played a game against Chiefs, a game against Pirates. Chiefs and Pirates then always played on the Thursday. It was normally in PE. And then whoever won that Chiefs Pirates derby got to play the international team on the Saturday. So it was always a Saturday to Saturday, 4 matches in a week. And then, of course, our involvement in the FIFA World Cup that we as South Africans hosted in 2010. So I based my experience on that, and I don't have any more experience than that in South African soccer. But let me say this, that what I found is, and it's a classic error, guys, that people just do the same old thing. So you do for this match what you did for last match and what you did for the match before that, and that can sometimes take you back years. And you haven't changed your methodology. You haven't looked at those risks critically. And so you go with same old, same old. And I'll tell you, the last thing I ever want on my epitaph is, yeah, we've done this before, we know what we're doing. Because that is, that's like walking into the job with blinkers on. So that's a long-winded way of answering the question, just to say that from my understanding and my experience, we don't get it right in South African football. And it's very much a case of, I don't know who gave, the contracts to the people that have them, but there was almost like an entrenched old boys way of doing it. Initially, it was the PSL security that we bumped heads with during the Vodacom Challenge. And they don't seem to want to adapt to international benchmarks. And, that's not necessarily their fault. Because when you look to improve something like what happened at the Bafana Congo match, it has to be everybody that buys in from the top. So it starts with SAFA, then it starts with those host PSL clubs, and everybody needs to take a critical look at this and say, guys, how can we do this better? And, it's not just in soccer that I see it in other sports, and I see it in other disciplines, and I do see a reticence to move on and say, look, we need to be better at this. We need to employ international best practice. We can't continue like this. I mean, Europe has been through such a plethora of tragedies where hundreds of people lost their lives before they got it right there. And we had our own disaster at Chiefs Pirates derby at Ellis Park. But somehow I don't think that soccer has the will to move on. Am I wrong?
I don't think you are.
I don't. I agree with you, Kev. I don't think you're wrong. Rory, I know you've been so gracious with your time. Listen, I've got a hard out now. Are you able to stay with us for 5 more minutes? Because this is an incredibly important matter. Sometimes people, as you say, speculate, and we say, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do this? But have the privilege of somebody like you break it down the way you're breaking down. If you got another 5 minutes for me in a little bit just after the break, that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
All right, love that. Rory Steyn, of course, NSA Global Securities Consultants founder, formerly looked after the great Nelson Mandela, and is one of the most respected security advisors in the world. He'll stay with us after the break as we get into a little bit more about how we can improve and be progressive with safety and security at sports events. It's Omni Sport Breakfast. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Fuel your game with the right nutrition, packed with protein and fiber. AGT Foods lentils and chickpeas are perfect as a power source. Eat clean, play strong. Brought to you by AGT Foods Africa. Good food, good health, good life. On the line with us still, Rory Steyn, of course. Kev, I'm going to throw straight to you. What you got for Rory?
Rory, you were speaking about it earlier, how people don't move on, they do the same thing. It's very much a changed global security landscape these days. From 2003 at the World Cup, there were certain things you had to do, but there wasn't the level of terrorism, there wasn't the worries about 9/11, there wasn't those sort of worries. I mean, in 2010, I remember you, I think you were working for Oakley at the time, and you told them not to go to the Commonwealth Games in Delhi because you're a bit worried about there was a security risk there, and yet you told me it'd be okay. If I died, I died. No, you didn't say that. Sorry, but I mean, how much has that landscape changed since you started this 25 years ago?
Oh, that's a great question, Kevin. It's changed tremendously. I mean, let's just look at cricket, which does kind of seem to be our forte. So, as you said, we started in 99, building up to 2003. And there wasn't a hang of a lot of, and there still is a low terrorism risk in our country, thank God. But I've just finished up at the USA West Indies T20 World Cup, the one where we lost in the final to India in June. I was head of security for the 3 US venues, that magnificent temporary stadium that they built on Long Island in New York, and Dallas, or actually it was Grand Prairie in Texas, as well as in Florida. Those were the 3 US venues. And, the terrorism risk of playing any international sport in New York, just as a state, never mind the actual city, because it wasn't. We were on Long Island in New York. It's chalk and cheese. We had, you name the anagram, from the FBI and the CIA and the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the local police department, everybody was so concerned about a terror attack especially on that India versus Pakistan match. And in fact, it was singled out by one of the extremist organizations. The World Cup was first threatened, and then about a week later on another social media post, they specifically targeted that match. Now, can you imagine the level of, I actually do want to use the word paranoia, the level of paranoia among law enforcement officials who've never hosted international cricket before. Now you've got the biggest fixture, irrespective of who plays in any final in cricket, the biggest fixture in cricket is when India played Pakistan. Now you've got that match in a sellout 34,000 temporary stand venue, and nobody there in any of those agencies has ever hosted such a match before. So the risk and the threat in this case is off the charts. So, and I remember, since you mentioned it, Kev, in 2010 when we hosted the World, so you had 32 international teams coming to play in our World Cup in 2010. And if you remember what was going on in our country at the time, I mean, our intelligence services, their eye was so far off the ball because it was all the politicking within the governing party, and the intelligence guys were involved. I mean, you'll remember those ridiculous reports about the grabber in Parliament and the slush funds that were, millions that were spent on building little empires, and that's what intelligence were involved in. So the thing that gave me comfort while we supported 3 of FIFA's 6 sponsors, top-tier sponsors, is that each of those 32 participating nations brings a host of their own intelligence, because they are as concerned as anybody as they travel to a country like South Africa, or any country for that matter. Qatar is in the Middle East. So each team that comes in, or each country that comes in, has an intelligence backbone that reports into a central hub. And that's what gave me so much confidence that, irrespective of whether our guys' eye was off the ball, at least we were getting credible intelligence coming from participating nations, and we kind of knew what the threats were. And as I said, as from a terrorism point of view, they were low in South Africa. But we know, we've seen it in France, we saw it in Russia, we've seen it in Germany. They are now no longer afraid to target sports events. I mean, I don't understand that, because if you're looking for public sympathy and people to join your cause, why the heck would you attack something that's so popular to people? But I think there's no accounting for the way that extremists think. But the reality is that there are no longer any holy cows. They will attack an Olympic Games, they will attack a World Cup if they can. And if they sense a soft spot, terrorists are very much like criminals. They're opportunists, and they look for the weak spot, and that's where they attack. So, it's never a thing that I take lightly when we are involved in planning or writing a security plan for a tournament or a tour or a series of events. You've got to keep your eye on the ball, and complacency is absolutely the enemy of what we do.
Well, Rory, you've raised a really interesting point for me, because I'd never considered that teams might bring their own intel into your country. Yeah. Now, you'd have to explain to me and to our listeners, if you don't mind. So, Bangladesh, Italy, and Russia come to South Africa. Let's just say Bangladesh, for whatever reason, made the 2010 World Cup. It doesn't matter. Let's just play in that world. They will bring their own intel guys. Do they now report to you as the South African intelligence on the ground, and you inform them? Or how does that dynamic work? Because surely they don't know the landscape as well as you do. Or do they come and do a recon before the tournament? How do their reporting structures work?
Okay, absolutely. So thanks for clarifying that. Perhaps I didn't express myself clearly enough. So they wouldn't send intelligence guys with the teams. They may send security managers. So each team probably travels with a security manager from the host country, because you are absolutely correct. When I went to the UK in '96 on President Mandela's state visit. I mean, I slept in Buckingham Palace for 3 nights for head of state, guys.
Awful.
We go with the understanding that the Brits are in charge because it's their country. They're in charge of his security. But they understand that we work with him on a 24/7 basis, so they will do well to listen to us. So it's a one hand washes the other scenario. And don't forget, when the Queen came to South Africa, then the shoe's on the other foot. Then we're in charge, and they travel out here knowing that. So you're 100% spot on. Local knowledge is king. You cannot replace local knowledge. I can be the best at what I do. I cannot walk into New York or Kinshasa or, Qatar, for that matter, into Doha, knowing what I know without understanding the local context. So you have to have local knowledge. So long-winded way of answering your question, what I'm saying is, when I say that the intelligence services of those host nations all brought their own intelligence, they fed it electronically into a central hub in South Africa. So we have the system here is called the Joint Operational Intelligence and Intelligence Structure. So it's a multi-government agency, the police, the military, the intelligence services, and a bunch of others. And that it sits at national and provincial level. So you have NAT joints and you have prov joints. So as those participating countries are sending their intelligence and saying, hey, we've picked up this and that, that's where it comes. So it comes into a central, almost like a depository. And there it's analyzed and it's compared. And, Europe have been incredibly successful at that, because when Europe had a problem with true football hooliganism, so I'm not talking just about drunken fans and passionate supporters, there's a massive difference between those and the anarchists that go to football games and actually arrange fights clandestinely, online and offline. They go there to basically disrupt and cause anarchy and chaos. What UEFA did is they established an intelligence system or service, so that the police services and intelligence services of European playing nations, they all get involved. So they share. These 3 guys, if they pitch up at your border post and present a passport, do not let them in. So they have a blacklist. So it's that kind of intelligence sharing that I'm talking about. And I know that happened because we did turn away a whole bunch of blacklisted thugs and criminals wanting to come to South Africa in 2010 because we were pre-warned by those countries' intelligence services to say, don't let these people in. They will cause chaos in your country. So that's really what I meant. So I say it again. So let's look at the USA, for example, and I say this for both their Olympic team as well as their football teams who travel to World Cups, is that they actually have government agents that come with them. They have FBI and other government agencies that travel out with them because of the risk, to those athletes just because they're American, for example. But then every country would do well. I mean, right now we are in Bangladesh playing a test match. It's day 2 today, I think. We've got a guy there with them. I was there a month ago doing the recce, checking if it was, safe enough, following the public violence that we saw in August. Can we send our boys there? And that is the modern way. You've got to be methodical. You've got to look at what the threat and the risks are, and then you've got to deploy your resources. You can't just go same old. That's my point.
Understood. Kev's got something for you.
Yeah, Rory, you've told me a lot of great Madiba stories down the years. I think my favourite one you told was about when Madiba was at Ellis Park in the parking lot, I think it was, and he got out and there was a cop, an old Afrikaans boer-type cop, and he walked up to him. Can you talk us through that story?
Yeah, Kev, it's incredible. I'll try and keep it to the 3 minutes. So if you have news or whatever it is at 8:00, I'll meet the deadline. But after Madiba passed, and people would ask me for my favorite memory, weird enough and for no particular reason, that's the story that kept coming to my mind. So I'll tell you what it was. It was actually on his inauguration day. On the 10th of May, 1994, he swore the oath of office before the Chief Justice at the Union Buildings, got in a helicopter and flew to Ellis Park to host to attend a soccer match. Now, who does that? You know, half an hour after you become president, you go to a soccer match. Well, somebody very smart on the inauguration committee decided if we put 60,000 soccer fans into Ellis Park, then that is 60,000 fewer people trying to get onto the lawns of the Union Buildings, but also 60,000 fewer people on the highway going north to Pretoria, where we had to move 184 big shot VIPs. I'm talking heads of state, heads of government, royalty, and all, because all the five-star hotels were in Joburg. You know, pretty much they still are. So that's what we were doing. And he walks onto the field, shakes hands with the two teams. South Africa were playing Zambia. So Bafana versus Polo. They were the national champions at the time. And he was a little bit late, not his fault. He was never late. And the teams were lined up at half time now. And as he's greeted by Safa, he goes straight to the lift, down to the dressing room level, and walks out onto the field where these 60,000 soccer fans in Ellis Park have just watched the inauguration on the big screens, and they are going crazy. And I'm asking myself, very new to this, it's day one for the Mandela presidency. I'm the commander of the VIP unit, and that's the capacity that I'm there in. I wasn't even part of his personal team at the time. I'm asking myself, have we got enough resources in here? You know, I've never done this before. And he shakes hands with the teams. He goes back into the tunnel, gets in the lift, comes out, immediately apologizes to Safa. He says, gentlemen, excuse me, I've got to get back to Pretoria. I've got 184 of the world's big shots waiting for me to host them for lunch. And he gets in the car. I take a step back and breathe a sigh of relief, and nothing happens. The motorcade doesn't move. And we see him trying to open the door, but he's just got in. And it's a 3.8-ton armored BMW. You don't just flick an elbow and the door opens. So the team leader asks the guy in the car, well, hey, why does he want to get out? That guy says, I don't know, he hasn't said anything. So the team leader opens the door. President says nothing to him. And Madiba comes back out of the car he's just got into. He walks around the bonnet of this BMW and he starts walking to the vehicle ramp at the back of this hall behind the president's suite where he should be driving out to go to the helipad. And the only guy standing there, Kev, you're correct, was an old school apartheid-era colonel in his full blue uniform. And his eyes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because the president's going directly towards him and he's got no idea why. And neither have we. We kind of like tagging along in the president's wake. And he stops in front of this colonel, puts out his hand, and he says to him, Colonel, I just want you to know that from today, you are our police. Oh. He said, I'm now the president of this country. But I want you to know that going forward, there is no more you and us. You are our police too. And guys, this old warrior had the lines on his face to show that he'd lived a long career and seen a lot of things. He started to cry. And the tears were dripping onto that polished wooden floor. And the old man just patted him on the shoulder and said, it's okay, Colonel. I just needed to tell you that today.
Absolutely.
And you know, it said so much to me. I still remember it like yesterday. It's 25 years ago, guys, because my rank was only one lower. I was a lieutenant colonel at the time. And that colonel represented the system that pursued Madiba, arrested him, tried him, convicted him, and sent him to prison for life. And on the very day that he became president, he had all the power now. He gets out of the car telling 184 VIPs they can just wait a few minutes. This guy needs to hear this from me today. So that's what changed my life, that conversation. Because how do you undo? I was 33 or 4 years old at the time. You know, how do you undo all of that conditioning and the way that I grew up? When I heard that exchange, I said, no, man, there's something special here. And I said, okay, so if you're gonna, believe in this thing of you're our police and we can build one country, I'm in, boots and all. And so it is. As I say, it changed my life, guys. An extraordinary, extraordinary human being.
Rory, unbelievable. I mean, that is a story of a lifetime. It's an incredible honor to have you here. You've been in the presence of greatness, as you say, arguably the greatest South African and arguably the greatest humanitarian of the last 100 years. It's an incredible honor to have had you on. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
It's been a privilege, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. Kev, thanks for inviting me, mate.
Cheers, Rory.
Rory Steyn, absolutely incredible. All right, after that, I mean, how do you top that story? Let's get out of here on this one. T20 cricket was first introduced to professional cricket by England and Wales in what year? That was 2003, ladies and gents. Incredible. What a story. Nelson Mandela, Rory Steyn. Hey, Omnisport Breakfast. We don't just bring you sport, we bring you stuff that is moving the world forward. Rory Steyn there, bringing the house down. That's it for today's show, though. Join us tomorrow as we bring you the greatest sport from Africa and around the world.
Listen live and on demand.
Welcome to Omnisport.